Okay, I'm just testing the stand. I'm not sure if it's going to work. I thought I wanted to talk about why I don't hit my children. Why I stopped hitting my stand goes up and down. I'm trying to figure it out how to make it work. Why I don't hit my children. Why I gave up hitting my children. When I was a child, Dad used to give us six of the best. He'd line us up and we'd have to pull our pants down, females and males, and then he'd spank us on the backside while the others were watching. So there was, and it used to hurt. He used to have a big leather motorcycle belt. It was very thick and it had steel prong things on it. And I don't think he hit us on the steel prong side, but it still hurt like heck. I remember as a child, he got those fiberglass bats, and he for a joke. I'm talking about being bullied. I'm going to give you a basis, a groundwork for the reason why I changed. And Dad, for a joke, in his eyes, he hit me on the arms with the bats, and the thin slivers of glass stuck in my arms. I think he hit me on the legs as well. And for days I had a rash. I was in a lot of pain. I couldn't touch my hands. I couldn't sleep on the side. And I had to go to school like that and not touch anyone and not have any clothes that touched my hands. And so the pain went on for quite a long time. I remember you had that magneto, I think it was for a plane or something, and you wound it up and this wires would spark at the end. And he got me to hold it one day, and I was probably 12. And he got me to hold it one day, and then he wound it up full bore while I was just standing there going, and these huge whopping shocks in my hand. And Dad was roaring with laughter. He thought it was so funny. And I remember as a kid being bullied at Huntley Primary School and things like that. And my mum used to always hit us with a jug cord. And I remember one time as a teenager, I tried to respect mother as a mother, and therefore if she hit me and she thought I'd done something wrong, I would just put up with it. And I remember as a teenager, mum getting the jug cord out, and she started whacking me for something I didn't do. And I stood there and I just put my hand out and I said, "Look, mum, I didn't do it." But I was taller than her by then and way more physical. And I was probably only about 15, 14. Yeah, probably about 14. And I just put my hand out and blocked her hits. And I said, "Look, I didn't do it." And she said, "You're getting punished for it." And she kept trying to hit me on the back of the legs. Mum would hold you by the shoulder and then hit you on the back of the legs with the jug cord. It used to hurt. And she kept trying to do it, and I just held back and said no. And that was the last time she ever hit me. And she cried. She broke down crying because she couldn't hit me, because she realised that was the end of it. She was never going to be able to physically hurt me again. I didn't hurt her or anything. I just stopped her and walked away. There was another occasion before I knew about pressure points, and Mum had a weapon, whether it was a wooden spoon or a stick or I can't remember what it was, and she tried hitting me. And she came up and she was mad at me for something, and I was a teenager, a kid, and she was going like this, trying to hit me, and I just kept blocking because, I didn't want to get hit by this thing, whatever it was, this weapon. And so I kept blocking, and in the end, she broke down crying and was holding her hands because it had hit the pressure points. I had no idea what pressure points were. I just didn't want to get hurt. And it probably was for another thing I didn't do. I used to get set up a lot by my older sister. So I knew a lot about bullying, and I also knew from my older sister when we were little, she used to steal cookies and stuff. And then she'd turn around and she'd tell Mum, James, well, I was called Jim back then, she'd say, "Jim stole the cookies from the cookie jar Mum would make. Mum would make cookies, put them in the cookie jar, and she'd count the cookies. And if one was missing, all hell would break loose. And so Vicky would turn around and say, James ate it. James stole 3 cookies. She used to come, take me out into the kitchen, steal 3 cookies out, Okay, I'm laughing because if I don't laugh, I'll go insane. She'd steal 3 cookies out, and then she'd eat them in front of me, and I'd say, "You can't do that. You're going to get into trouble." And she'd say, "No, you're getting into trouble." And I'd say, "What?" And then she'd run out and tell Mum, "I just saw Jim stealing 3 cookies from the cookie jar, and he ate them right in front of me and laughed." And she'd come in with a jug cord, and I'd be like 7 years old, 6 years old, and get the height of my life. And Vicky'd be at the door going, laughing at me. So bullying was something I was very used to. It happened a lot in my life, and at school, you had the school bullies and stuff like that. So I got to the stage where, as an adult, I deeply felt that children should be treated fairly. And when I saw people hurt children, I'd get extremely angry. And I remember when, for I would run around, and if I saw children out of car seats on seat belts, and I would actually walk up and yell at the parents in the cars. I was quite known for it here in Takarawa, and people would think I was crazy because I just go up to a random car or like gang people or whatever and start yelling at them, "Put your kids in seatbelts, are you crazy? You're gonna," and I'd have a fit at them. And my ex-wife had to calm me down to a level where I wouldn't lose it. Ernie Wise from Malcolm and Wise was well known for watching TV. His wife would say he'd watch TV and he'd say anything against children, he'd freak out. So to me, bullying was horrendous. I hated it, and I hated what Dad did to me, what other people did to me, and they saw no wrong in it. But Dad knew that when he hit me with the bats for insulation, that the glass would go into my arms. He knew I was going to be in pain for a while, while the rash and the slithers came out. And I didn't get any medical help or anything. I just had to live with it. It was, and so that was life. And as an adult, my children were little, like probably, I got Tracy and Rachel when their mother left 3 or 4. And one day I smacked one of them for something on the backside, and they were wearing clothes, and then I put them in the bath, and I walked out of the room, and then I looked back in, and she stood up in the bath naked and with her back to me, and she was about I can't remember if it was Tracy or Rachel, one of them, and there was a red hand mark on her backside, and I looked at that and I thought, "Oh, you broke. Look what you did to your cat." And I thought, and I just came down the hall here and I said, "I can't do it anymore." I just couldn't. I just felt like a bully. I felt like a brute. I felt like someone who was beating my child. I wasn't beating my child, but I felt like I was talking to Mary the other day, my friend who walks dogs in the morning, and she said to me, there's a difference between hitting and correcting. So, and I was talking to a child therapist one day. Rachel was referred as a child to a child therapist because she's speech issues, but the lady did a lot of mental checking on her, and I have a feeling the speech thing was just an excuse to mentally check her without offending me or getting me upset. So I took her there, and the lady said to me, under no circumstances should you ever hurt a child. And I said, well, actually, you can. And she looked at me and she'd done all her degrees and all her stuff at university. And she said, no. And I said, yes. And she said, when? And I said, when your child runs on the road and it's a toddler, and the smack her in the back of the legs or whatever is far better than that child walking in front of a car. And I said, you can sit down and talk to that child again and again and again. They won't comprehend what you're saying. It has no idea that walking in front of a car is going to cripple it or kill it. So you have to give it a sharp smack to let it know, don't go on the road. and she had to agree. There was no, there's nothing else for it. That was the truth. So that was good. Um, and so I was telling Mary the other day, I said, once I realised I couldn't hit my children anymore, I had the horrible. I came into the kitchen here and I sat there and I thought to myself, so what do I do? All my life I'd been beaten by mum and dad for anything they expected me to do. I know adults have told me, many parents have told me how they went to, they'd punish their child and then find out afterwards the child was innocent. And that was one of the reasons I stopped hitting them. Was there was an incident probably close to that time when I did that, where the other one done it, and I punished the wrong child. And I realised when I did it, you can't take back a smack. So if you go up to the child and give a good smacking on the backside, you can't take your smack back. I learned that from mum. Mum was always giving me hidings for things I didn't do because my sister was always setting me up. And because she was the oldest, mum always believed her. When I start to argue, she'd just say, no, she's right. She's the oldest. You're lying. And I'd stare and go, I'm not lying. And she'd go, come here and take your punishment. And I'd have to walk over and get a hiding. So bullying horrified me. And the thought of hitting a child who can't defend itself. Remember, you're the big one. You're the adult. A child cannot defend itself. So the thought of hitting that child when that child didn't do anything wrong, it would have, it was a horrible thought. But on top of it, it creates a resentment in that child for you that it'll never get over. And you get these things on the internet where they always go, oh, I was spanked by my parents and da-da-da-da. And it was a great thing. And it's just, it's rubbish. It's backing up and supporting a form of brutality. And so anyway, I thought, well, how am I going to do this if I can't do it that way? There's going to be another way of doing it. And so I came up with probably this woman, Churchwood, her daughter, Tracy, wanted to go to martial arts, and I took the kids to martial arts in Viterra. That's how I got into martial arts. And I was trying around that time to figure this out, probably about 4 or 5, and I started using the wooden spoon on the hand, just going smack. And so don't do that. And I didn't like that either. And the kids were looking at me like, argh. And then at one stage, they had the wooden spoons. It was hysterical. The kids thought it was a great joke. But they were still too young, and I couldn't hit them hard. I didn't want to hit them hard. I was constantly in a battle of you're being a bully. I was always telling myself, you're being a bully. Don't hit them like that, So when I could, I would explain things. Hold on a second. It should be still working here. And so I got to the stage where I'd explain things to them, and I'd sit down and I'd say, well, you can do this and you can do that. One of the really clever ones I came up with was Rachel was always running behind the car or in front of cars or running on the road. When I went downtown with her, and it was me and Tracy, Tracy was like 5 and Rachel was about 4, Rachel would run on the road. And she used to terrify me. It just terrified me. So to get her out of that habit, I went through a lot of stress. I'd yell at her in the street if she broke away and ran away. I'd be screaming at her, and I'd be trying to carry or hold Tracy at the same time. So it was 2 to look after, and it's a single dad. And it occurred to me one day, I came in and I saw I had a big bright grapefruit. It was very brightly coloured. And so I got a felt permanent marker in black, and I put a smiley face on it. And then I took it out and put it behind the station wagon. I had a Ford Cortina station wagon. And I stuck it under the back wheel. And then I took Rachel over and I said, look at that, what do you think of that? And she was raving how cute it was. She thought it was beautiful. She said, oh, it's so cute. No, I think I picked it up and pretended to play games with her to get her emotionally attached to this grapefruit. Then I put the grapefruit on the ground behind the wheel. And I said, hey, look, the grapefruit's run behind the car. And she said, oh. And she was just sort of staring at it and said, now watch what happens. And I got in the car and she stood and was watching and I backed over the grapefruit. And then I drove forward again. And she was just staring at the grapefruit and stuff had come out of it and it had big splits in it. It was actually in pretty good condition considering it was still whole. And so I picked up the grapefruit and I said, look at this. Look what happens when the grapefruit goes behind the car or steps in front of a car. And she started crying. She was so emotionally attached to this grapefruit. She had a wonderful child's mind. And she cried and she couldn't believe it. And from that day on, she never went behind a car or ran out on the road. She learned her lesson. And I found that you could find ways to get through to them. But one of the best things I did was at martial arts was I gave them press-ups. And if they did something wrong, I'd just say 10 press-ups and they'd go, oh, and then they'd do press. Now, if I made a mistake and was punching the wrong person, at least by doing press-ups, they were getting fitter. Okay, so, and it was hard and it was a struggle and it was hard to come up with the right plans and the right ideas. The best thing and then we did the corner. They sat in the corner and one day Rachel was in the corner and then I discovered that what she did was wrong and I was wrong for putting her in she hadn't done anything wrong. And what I'd done is put her in the corner wrong. I was in the wrong. So I told her to get out of the corner and then I sat in the corner where she was and she cried and cried and she said, no, Daddy can't go in the corner, only Rachel can go in the corner. And so that was sad and she ended up hopping on my lap and we both ended up crying. And it was an extremely touching moment. And the best way though is to sit them down and explain to them what's wrong, why they shouldn't do it, and what'll happen if they do it again, or what could happen. You know, with children there's a lot of coulds, and there's not absolute. So you had to sit down, and so what I do is I would sit down and I would explain the situation, explain the right way to do it, and explain what they'd done. And then explain to them how they could hurt themselves if it was dangerous to them, or how they could hurt someone else, or how it would break something and we couldn't afford to fix it on the welfare, how it was dangerous or would lead to a bad habit and things like that. And they would sit there and they would think it out and they wouldn't do it again. So I think we've been taught to hit from person to person. And we had a thing, we watched a Goofy movie and it was Goofy and the Sun. And we would say from goof to goof. It's true. It's me and the children would say, whenever you saw a situation where the child copied the parent, we'd say from goof to goof. So I gave up hitting my children, because I just felt it was being a bully. At church, I stood up against the whole entire church who believe in some weird way that God believes that you should beat your children or hit them. And I said, in front of everyone, I said, I don't hit my children. And I was told, and they all agreed, they all nodded their head, I was told that I don't love my children because I don't hit them. And that's what you get from fundamental churches, where they're very firm and very hard on their ways, and they're very There's a huge advantage to fundamental churches with the anti-sin and anti-doing bad stance, but they can be very caustic, very judgmental, and not have answers. That's what I discovered from them. If you're an alcoholic, they referred you to someone else. If you were sinning in another area, they send you somewhere else. They never had an answer to help you. And the past would just throw verses at you if you're an alcoholic. And he just say 4 or 5 verses, and he'd say, go think on that, and somehow magistically become a non-alcoholic. And that's just not how it works. It's not reality. That's not common sense. So I gave up hurting my children because I didn't like the feeling I got hurting them. And I didn't like being a bully because I'd been bullied. I didn't like, because I knew that another thing I used to say to myself was, I used to say, James, you're the adult, they're the child, you're the mature one, they're the immature one. How can they be out-tricking you, outwitting you, and smarter than you when you're smarter than them by many years of wisdom? So why would you need to resort to hitting them? You must find another way. And so I did go through trials. I did the wooden spoon, and then the press-ups. Oh, and the press-ups, got to tell you a story. The press-ups turned out to be a very interesting. The kids were at Balmoral School, and we left Balmoral School, we went to some place. And these boys, really smart aleck boys, challenged my daughters to press-ups. And my daughters just turned and said, oh, sure, okay. And they've been doing huge amounts of press-ups, but they've never done them as one big roll. They've been doing like 10, 20. I think the highest they ever got for the worst thing they ever did was like 25. And I was told by people they'd be deformed and, how do you do that to your children? So I just kept doing it. I'd rather they got press-ups than hurting them. And the press-ups really paid off in karate class and in their fitness. And there was a few times they had alterations with kids at school, and they were stronger. And it's even bigger kids. So anyway, these boys challenged my daughter. So they all got down on their fours, and my daughters didn't do girls press-ups. I refused to let them. So we went to a different martial arts class at a different stage, and the sensei said for the girls to do the ones on their knees, press-ups, and I said, my daughters did it because he said to do it, and I just looked at them. I said no, and they had to do male press-ups, and the sensei was like, oh, and they, and they ended up sparring with the kids, and they thrashed them. It was really cool to watch. But anyway, they did these press-ups with these boys, and Rachel stopped at 90 press-ups, and Rachel was probably 8 years old. And I'm not lying. She stopped at 90 press-ups. And Tracy stopped at 100. The boys cacked out in the teens. Honest to goodness, they finished at about 20. And it was, Tracy would have been about 9. And it was incredible to watch. And Tracy was bragging afterwards, look, I did 100 press-ups, And I said to her, the only reason you did 100 press-ups because you're the naughtiest kid in the house. Anyway, so it paid off. Anyway, and the boys, they would have gone way through their lives. I can't even remember who they were, and they would have thought, there's about 4 or 5 of them, and they would have thought, well, they had second thoughts about pushing females around. So it's kind of cool. So anyway, I didn't bully. I didn't like physically hurting them. You can grab your children. You can move them to a different place. You can, if you have to, grab their hand hard. I remember walking Rachel downtown as a kid, and she started screaming, Daddy, you're hurting my hand, Daddy, you're hurting my hand. I've seen other kids do this, their dads do. And I'd look at her, and people would frown at me like, he's hurting that little girl's hand, and Rachel was just trying to break away to run on the road. So I'd just pull her in, and I'd say, don't, because I'm not going to let go. And Rachel was that kind of kid where she challenged you on every single level. So you either did it or you didn't, sort of thing. And if you gave in, she'd get the advantage over you. So you were never ever to give in. I remember Jimmy at the back here. We were outside. He wanted something, and he had the classic tantrum. He dropped to the. I said no, and he dropped to the ground, and he started screaming and punching the ground and kicking his feet, and he was screaming at the top of his voice. So I just stood there like this, and I just watched him. And I wondered, I looked over the neighbours' fences and no one said anything. I was wondering if someone was going to look over and find out why this kid was going totally hysterical. He was probably about 6 to 8, I'm not sure. And he went totally crazy. And then finally he realised nothing was going to happen, and he never did it again. He got up and he just stared at me, and I said, if you do that again, no matter where we are, even in town, I'm just going to let you do it. And that was it. Once Jimmy and I walked as an alternative punishment. Jimmy went through a really naughty stage when he was about 8, maybe 7 or 8. And him and I walked 5 kilometres to town because we didn't have a car. And we walked to town to get groceries. When we got to Countdown, we were at the back of Countdown, and we were looking at some stuff. And because they have a lot of odds and ends, really cool stuff to buy, even tools. And we were looking at toys. And we were looking through that stuff, and Jimmy did something. And I asked him to behave all the way. But all the way we walked into town, he was getting naughtier and naughtier and naughtier. And remember, I didn't spank them. So I thought, how am I going to deal with this? It was a long walk to walk into town in the hot sun and everything. And when we got, he just decided he was not going to behave, and he was going to push me and push me and push me. And I said, you do that one more time and we're going home. And he didn't. So I said, come on. And then without getting the groceries, because whenever we got the groceries, I would always buy him something to eat for lunch for walking all the way into town. And we didn't get that, so we just walked all the way home. And he was horrified, and he never, ever did that again, because he realised that I would back up what I said. And that's the thing, if you back it up, I could have smacked him in Countdown. I could have taken him across to the park and smacked him, or I could have taken him home and smacked him. But I felt that him walking all the way to town and then walking all the way home and getting nothing, not even dinner, lunch for walking all that way, was enough lesson. And it worked wonderfully. He never ever did it again. So these are the kind of lessons that are deep set. And next time we walked into town, I'd say, are you going to behave? And he'd just go, oh, yeah. And he'd remember what we did previously. And it was deep set in his head. If you muck Dad around and you go somewhere and you keep pestering him and making his life hard, he's just going to take you back home. And so you see, people, and if we were walking home and he started to misbehave and we'd had dinner and had the groceries and he was misbehaving, then I just wouldn't take him next time. I'd just go by myself or take Grace. So I've been very amazed in the things I've done and the ways I've done them like that, and people have told me that I'm mean or a bully. I remember giving the kids 10 press-ups, teaching Rachel, and other children coming up and saying, oh my gosh, you're a brute, you're horrible, you're cruel to your children, how could you do that to them? And all that sort of stuff they happened to see. I think it was maybe the front section or somewhere else, I can't remember. I also punish the children in front of other children if they're going to do it in whatever they're misbehaving with. And I've been told that's cruel, that's shameful, that's mean. But if they don't learn from it, they just know that when they're in front of other people, they can misbehave. So they'll just say, oh, well, Dad's not going to hit us in front of not hit us. Dad's not going to punish us in front of other people. So we'll just misbehave. We'll just do, as long as other people around will be naughty. So what I would do is punish them in front of the other people with the press-ups, or sometimes just sit them down and talk to them and say, look, what you're doing is, and their friends would say, look, he's giving them a lecture right here, right in front of us, and sort of thing, and they wouldn't like it. The point is especially you're teaching your child right from wrong. You're trying to maintain their safety. You're trying to protect them. You're trying to grow wisdom and knowledge in their head that will last them a lifetime. You're trying to make them capable for life so that when situations like this come up with them in the future, they'll know what to do. You're trying to just to input in their minds common sense, wisdom, logic, and a difference between right and wrong, and the value of choosing right and how it will affect their lives in the future, and how they will become better for it, and those that know them will become better for it as well. So yes, I know this has gone pretty long. Is there a time? I can't see a timer on there, but this has probably gone for a while, so I'll leave it at that. But that is why I gave up hitting my children. Yes, God bless you. Have a good day.